Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through 100 Unsolved Skyrim Mysteries. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight. The vanishing of an entire civilization. Let's begin with perhaps the most profound enigma that haunts not just Skyrim, but all of Tamriel. The Dwemer, often called the Deep Elves or Dwarves by those unfamiliar with their true nature, were once the most technologically advanced race to walk the face of Nirn. Their cities stretched deep into the mountains, marvels of engineering that modern scholars can barely comprehend, let alone replicate. They harnessed the power of steam and gears, created sentient machines called automatons that still guard their ruins thousands of years later, and delved into realms of knowledge that would drive lesser minds to madness. Yet one day, in an instant that defied all understanding, they simply ceased to exist. Not a single living Dwemer remains in all of Tamriel, save for one mysterious individual encountered in previous Elder Scrolls games. The year was 1 700, during the Battle of Red Mountain in Morrowind. The Dwemer, led by their chief tonal architect Kagranak, had discovered something that should never have been found. The heart of Lorcan, the literal heart of the dead god who created the mortal realm of Mundus. In their infinite hubris and relentless pursuit of transcendence, they sought to tap into its divine power, to transform their entire race into something beyond mortality, beyond the limitations of flesh and blood. What happened next remains one of history's greatest mysteries. When Kagranak struck the heart with his tools, every Dwemer on Nirn vanished instantly. Based on what we know from historical accounts, scholars have proposed several possibilities. Some theorize that the Dwemer achieved their goal and transcended to a higher plane of existence, leaving behind only their empty cities and mechanical servants. Others believe something went catastrophically wrong, unmaking them from reality itself in an instant. One compelling theory suggests that all Dwemer souls were absorbed into Numidium, the massive brass god they had constructed using the heart's power. The fact that only one Dwemer survived, Yagrum Bagan, who was in what he called an outer realm at the time, could imply that the disappearance was tied specifically to proximity to the heart or to Nirn itself. Walking through the silent halls of places like Blackreach or Nchuanzel, you can almost feel the weight of their absence. The lanterns still burn with an eternal flame, the gears still turn in their endless cycles, and the automatons still patrol corridors that have known no footsteps but their own for millennia. In some ruins, you'll find research notes and journals, the final recorded thoughts of a people on the brink of something momentous. They speak of grand experiments, of breakthrough discoveries, of a transformation that would change everything. And then, nothing. The entries simply stop, mid-thought sometimes, as if the writer vanished between one word and the next. What makes this mystery particularly haunting is the sheer completeness of their disappearance. In every other instance of a civilization's fall throughout Tamriel's history, there are survivors, refugees, descendants who carry on some fragment of their culture. But the Dwemer left nothing except their machines and their mysteries. No graves mark where they fell. No legends speak of their final days passed down through generations. No prophecies foretold their end. They were simply there one moment and gone the next, leaving behind only the mechanical echoes of their former greatness. The former, the Snow Elves, who had been enslaved and twisted by Dwemer cruelty, must have witnessed something during that final moment. But centuries of living in darkness and feeding on toxic fungi have degraded them into blind, savage creatures incapable of coherent communication. If they retain any memory of what happened to their former masters, they cannot or will not share it. And so we are left to wander their ruins, to puzzle over their machinery, to read their inscriptions, and to wonder what knowledge died with them. What secrets did they take to whatever realm they now inhabit? What discoveries await us in the depths we haven't yet explored? And most troubling of all, could whatever happened to them happen again? The enigma of identity, moving from the grand scale of civilizations to the intimate scale of individuals. Skyrim is populated with people who carry secrets as heavy as any ancient ruin. Consider Rune, a member of the Thieves' Guild in Riften. His name isn't really his name at all, merely a designation given to him by circumstance. Rune washed ashore near Solitude 18 years ago, a small child found among the wreckage of a trading vessel. In his pocket was a smooth stone inscribed with runes in a language no one could decipher. He had no memory of who he was, where he came from, or what had happened to bring him to Skyrim shores. The people who found him, unable to determine his true identity, simply called him Rune, after the mysterious stone that was his only possession. Now, years later, Rune has carved out a life for himself in the shadows of Riften, but the question of his origins gnaws at him constantly. He speaks of it with a mixture of curiosity and resignation, as though he spent so long wondering that he's almost afraid of finally learning the truth. He'll tell you that he's tried to trace his past, following what few leads he could find, but every path led nowhere. The stone itself, that cryptic artifact that gave him his name, offers no answers. Scholars and mages who've examined it are baffled by the inscriptions, which don't match any known language or runic system in Tamriel. What makes Rune's mystery particularly intriguing is that it seems to be part of cut content from the game's development. Evidence in the game files suggests there was once a quest plan that would have helped Rune uncover his origins, but for reasons unknown, it was never fully implemented. This means that somewhere in the developers' minds, there exists an answer to Rune's mystery, a complete story about where he came from and what that stone means. But that answer was never shared with players, leaving Rune forever suspended in a state of not knowing, forever wondering if somewhere out there he has a family, a home, a history that extends beyond the dock where he washed ashore. Then there's Sapphire, another Thieves' Guild member whose very name raises questions. She claims she took the name Sapphire because of her affinity for precious gems. But even after you help her with her personal quest and gain her trust, she refuses to reveal her real name. There's a note in the Thieves' Guild headquarters that warns others that Sapphire is more than meets the eye. A cryptic statement that only deepens the mystery surrounding her. Who was she before she came to Riften? What happened to make her abandon her birth name so completely that she won't share it even with those she considers friends? Through careful investigation and piecing together various clues scattered throughout Skyrim, some players have theorized connections between Sapphire and other characters, but nothing is ever confirmed outright. Her real name, her true history, the events that brought her to the Thieves' Guild, all of it remains locked behind her determined silence. There's a pain in that silence a history of trauma that she's chosen to bury beneath a new identity. Perhaps her past is too painful to speak of, or perhaps she fears that revealing it would endanger her somehow. Either way, the woman who calls herself Sapphire guards her secrets as carefully as any dragon guards its hoard, and we may never know what lies beneath the glittering surface she presents to the world. The Ebony Warrior presents a different kind of mystery entirely. This towering Redguard warrior, clad entirely in ebony armor, seeks out the Dragonborn once they reach level 80, which in itself makes him one of the rarest encounters in the game. Most players will never reach such a lofty level, and thus will never meet this enigmatic figure. He appears suddenly at one of the major cities, his presence commanding attention despite saying very little. What he does say, however, is deeply puzzling. The Ebony Warrior claims that he has accomplished everything there is to accomplish in life. He has conquered every challenge, defeated every foe, mastered every skill, and now finds existence itself has become meaningless. He seeks only one thing, a glorious death at the hands of a worthy opponent, namely you, the Dragonborn. He asks that you meet him at the last vigil, a remote location high in the mountains, where you will battle to the death. What makes this particularly strange is that despite being a Redguard, he wishes to be sent to Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife reserved for honored dead warriors, a place where, by all the lore we understand, he should not be able to go. But who is he? How did he accomplish all these legendary feats without anyone in Skyrim having heard of him before he seeks you out? If he's truly conquered every challenge and defeated every enemy, why is there no legend attached to his name? No songs sung by bards, no tales told in taverns? He claims to have done everything, yet we know nothing of what he's done. This creates a paradox that has puzzled players for years. What makes his request even stranger is that despite being a Redguard, he wishes to be sent to Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife reserved for honored warriors. According to everything we understand about Tamriel's cosmology, only those who hold to Nordic beliefs and die honorably in combat go to Sovngarde. Why would a Redguard, who would typically be drawn to a different afterlife, seek entry there? Perhaps he's adopted Nordic beliefs so completely that he qualifies. Or perhaps there's something about his nature we don't understand. Consider also the mystery of Falion, the court mage of Morthal. This elderly Redguard possesses knowledge that no other mage in Skyrim seems to have. He knows how to cure vampirism through a ritual involving a black soul gem filled with a grand soul. This ritual is not documented in any book, not taught at the College of Winterhold, and not known to any other practitioner of magic in the province. So how did Falion learn it? When you speak with him, he makes a cryptic claim that raises more questions than it answers. He mentions that he has met Daedra and Dwemer and everything in between. The Daedra part is believable enough. Many mages traffic with the Daedric princes in pursuit of knowledge or power. But the Dwemer, they vanished over 4,000 years ago. If Falion has truly encountered them, it would suggest either that he has discovered time travel, that he's impossibly ancient despite appearing as an elderly but not ancient man, or perhaps that some Dwemer survived in places we haven't found. It's also possible he's exaggerating or lying to enhance his reputation. Whatever the truth, his unique knowledge of the vampirism cure suggests he's learned things from sources others cannot access. locations that defy explanation. Skyrim's landscape is dotted with places that make no sense, locations that seem to exist for reasons we cannot fathom. Take Kagranzel, a Dwemer ruin on the far eastern edge of the map. Reaching it requires a significant trek through dangerous terrain, and when you finally arrive, you're greeted with one of the most unusual and unsettling dungeons in the entire game. The entrance leads into a massive cavernous chamber unlike any other Dwemer ruin. In the center of this vast space floats a glowing orb of light, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. Two corpses lie nearby, the bodies of adventurers who came before you and met some unknown fate. If you're foolish or curious enough to touch the orb, the floor suddenly gives way beneath you. A cage erupts from the ground, trapping you, and then you plummet. You fall through the darkness for what feels like an eternity, the walls of the shaft rushing past, until you finally crash into water far, far below. If you survive the fall, and survival is not guaranteed without preparation, you find yourself in an underground lake with no obvious connection to the chamber above. The dungeon continues from there, full of Falmer and the usual underground horrors. But the purpose of that initial chamber, that floating orb, that trap, remains completely mysterious. Based on the Dwemer's typical engineering practices, this could have been a test of some kind, perhaps for potential recruits or researchers. It might have been a defense mechanism designed to eliminate intruders in a dramatic fashion. Or given the Dwemer's fascination with experimenting on living subjects, this could have been part of a larger system for transporting materials or people through their underground network. The sheer scale of the chamber suggests it was meant for something important. But what? The Dwemer didn't build things without purpose. Yet the function of Kagranzel's grand entrance chamber eludes all understanding. It doesn't connect to the rest of the ruin in any logical way. The trap itself seems unnecessarily elaborate and dangerous, and that orb, that strange floating orb that draws you in with its mysterious light, its nature and purpose remain unknown. Then there's Frostflow Lighthouse, which appears at first glance to be a simple, abandoned lighthouse on the northern coast. But entering the building reveals a scene of horror that transforms what should be a straightforward location into one of Skyrim's most disturbing mysteries. The lighthouse is covered in blood. Furniture is overturned. Clear signs of a violent struggle mark every room. In the cellar, you discover a journal that tells the terrifying story of a family who lived here. They began hearing strange sounds from below, scratching and movement in places where nothing should be. The father, Habd, went to investigate and found a tunnel system beneath the lighthouse that hadn't been there when they moved in. As you descend into these tunnels, following Habd's path, you discover that his family was killed by a Chorus Reaper, a massive insectoid creature that had somehow tunneled up from the depths. The journal entries chronicle the family's growing fear, their attempts to understand what was happening, and finally, the night when the creature emerged and slaughtered them. You can find their bodies scattered throughout the tunnels, and if you're thorough, you'll discover the remains of Habd himself. The quest asks you to bring the ashes of the family to the lighthouse's beacon and light it in their memory. A somber task that provides some closure. But questions linger. How did that Chorus tunnel system appear beneath an established lighthouse? Chorus typically inhabit Dwemer ruins and Falmer settlements, and they don't normally burrow through solid rock. to reach random surface locations. This raises several possibilities. Perhaps there was already a tunnel system below that the family was unaware of when they purchased the property. If so, who built it and for what purpose? It's also possible that there was a former nest or Dwemer ruin nearby that connected to the lighthouse through underground passages. The alternative, that a Chorus Reaper deliberately tunneled toward the lighthouse for some reason, seems less likely, but can't be entirely ruled out. The location of the lighthouse itself, isolated on the northern coast and far from any known former settlements or Dwemer ruins, makes the presence of such a creature particularly puzzling. It's as if the location was designed to tell a horror story, but the logic connecting all the elements doesn't quite align, leaving us with a terrifying incident whose full explanation remains hidden. Consider the Reaper's lair in the Soul Cairn, accessible only through the Dawnguard expansion. The Soul Cairn itself is already one of the most desolate and unsettling locations in Skyrim, a sort of afterlife where souls are trapped for eternity. But hidden in a corner of this nightmare realm, in a small, unassuming fort with no identifying markers and no beacon of light like the other structures in the area, is the Reaper's lair. To summon the Reaper, you must find 3 Reaper gem fragments scattered throughout the Soul Cairn and place them on pedestals within the lair. Do so, and the Reaper rises, a massive, terrifying entity with glowing red eyes and an executioner's garb, wielding a scythe that can cut down even the most powerful Dragonborn. But who or what is the Reaper? The souls trapped in the Soul Cairn speak of him with abject terror, referring to him as the one who tends the dead, or the keeper of this place. He seems to serve as some kind of executioner or enforcer for the ideal masters, the mysterious beings who control the Soul Cairn. But his exact nature, his purpose, why he must be summoned rather than being permanently active, and what would happen if he were never summoned at all, none of this is explained. He exists as a boss fight, a challenge for players who are thorough enough to find the gem fragments. But his lore, his reason for being, remains frustratingly vague. In a realm where every other entity has some explanation or backstory, the Reaper stands alone as a pure enigma, a horror without a history. Blackreach deserves special mention as one of Skyrim's most magnificent mysteries. This massive underground cavern is so vast that it contains its own ecosystem, complete with glowing mushrooms that tower like trees, underground lakes, and a full sky created by luminescent minerals. Discovering Blackreach feels like finding a hidden world, and its required visiting during the main quest line makes it one of the few truly spectacular locations that most players will experience. But the questions Blackreach raises are profound. How did the Dwemer create this? Was it natural and they simply built within it? Or did they carve it out themselves? The scale of the cavern is so immense that either answer seems impossible. And then there's Volthuriel, the dragon who lives in Blackreach's depths. If you're observant and experimental enough to use unrelenting force on the massive glowing orb that hangs in the cavern center, a dragon emerges and attacks you. But how did a dragon end up trapped underground? Dragons are creatures of the sky, of mountaintops and open air. What sequence of events led to Volthuriel being in Blackreach? Was he trapped there during the Dragon War thousands of years ago? Has he been down there all this time? Or does he come and go through some passage we can't find? And why does he emerge when that specific orb is struck? Is it a summons, an alarm? The game provides no answers, treating Volturiel as little more than an Easter egg, a secret boss for players to discover without considering the logical and lore implications of a dragon living in a Dwemer cavern. The Midden, beneath the College of Winterhold, contains its own collection of mysteries. This network of tunnels and chambers serves as a sort of dumping ground for the college's failed experiments and dangerous artifacts. Most players will visit parts of the Midden during college quests, but exploring its full extent reveals disturbing secrets. In one chamber, you'll find 4 bodies arranged around a strange gauntlet on a pedestal. An investigation report nearby explains that 4 students attempted a summoning ritual using 4 rings and this artifact. The ritual went catastrophically wrong, and all 4 students died. If you're clever enough to find the 4 rings scattered throughout the college's Arcanium library and place them on the gauntlet, you can perform the ritual yourself. This summons a Dremora named Velexane, who admits he killed the students when they summoned him. But the mystery isn't just what happened to those students, it's what that gauntlet is, and why it was in the college in the first place. Who created it? What was its intended purpose? Why were those specific rings needed to activate it? And most troublingly, why was such a dangerous artifact left in a place where students could find it and attempt to use it? The College of Winterhold is supposed to be a place of learning and magical research, but the Midden suggests there are far more dangerous things lurking beneath the mage's study than anyone wants to admit. The questions that quests leave behind. Some of Skyrim's most intriguing mysteries emerge from quests themselves. Situations where the game presents you with choices or information, but never quite resolves what the truth actually is. Consider In My Time of Need, one of the most debated quests in Skyrim's community. You're approached by members of the Alika, warriors from Hammerfell, who are searching for a Redguard woman. They claim she's a traitor who sold information to the Aldmeri Dominion that led to the destruction of an entire city. Eventually, you discover the woman they're seeking is Sadia, a barmaid at the Bannered Mare in Whiterun. When confronted, Sadia tells a very different story. She claims she's not a traitor but a dissident, that she spoke out against the Aldmeri Dominion in Hammerfell and was forced to flee when they branded her an enemy. She insists the Alika are actually working for the Thalmor, sent to capture or kill her to silence her voice against their oppression. The quest forces you to choose who to believe: the Alika warriors, who claim to be serving justice, or Sadia, who claims to be a victim of political persecution. Both sides present their case convincingly. Both have reasons to lie and reasons to be telling the truth. The game never reveals which side is actually right. Whomever you support, you get paid, and the quest concludes. But which version of events is true? Was Sadia truly a traitor who betrayed her people? Or was she a freedom fighter being hunted by the same oppressive regime she spoke against? The game leaves this deliberately ambiguous, and players have spent years debating the evidence. Some point to inconsistencies in Sadia's story, like the fact that she claims to be a noblewoman, yet works as a barmaid. Others note that the Alika's behavior, including their attempt to infiltrate Whiterun despite being banned from the city, seems suspicious for legitimate authorities. The truth remains elusive, a Schrodinger's betrayal where both versions of events exist in superposition until you force a resolution through action. The mystery of Nafi and his sister Rada in Ivarstead raises equally troubling questions. Nafi, a disturbed beggar living in his family's ruined home, asks you to find his sister, who disappeared a year ago. You eventually discover Rada's remains in a stream near town, along with her necklace. You can return the necklace to Nafi, giving him closure of a sort, though it only deepens his madness and grief. But the mystery doesn't end there. Later, if you join the Dark Brotherhood, you receive a contract to assassinate Nafi himself. Someone has performed the Black Sacrament, the ritual to contact the Dark Brotherhood, and paid to have this harmless, insane beggar killed. But who and why? Nafi is a pathetic figure, not a threat to anyone. He has no money, no property worth claiming, no power or influence. What could anyone possibly gain from his death? Some players theorize that whoever killed Rada also wants Nafi dead to tie up loose ends, but that raises the question of who killed Rada and why. Others suggest that perhaps Nafi knows something dangerous, something his madness has hidden, even from himself, and someone wants to silence him before he accidentally reveals it. But the game never tells us who performed the Black Sacrament, or why they wanted Nafi dead. The quest simply exists, a contract fulfilled, leaving behind only questions about what kind of person would pay to have a mad beggar murdered. The Great Collapse of Winterhold stands as one of Skyrim's most significant unexplained events. Over a century before the events of the game, the once prosperous city of Winterhold was devastated by a cataclysm that caused most of the city to fall into the sea. The only part that survived intact was the College of Winterhold, the Academy for Mages. This has led many of Winterhold's surviving residents to blame the college, believing that a magical experiment gone wrong caused the disaster. The mages insist they're innocent, that they had nothing to do with the Great Collapse, but they can't explain why the college alone survived when everything around it was destroyed. Various theories have been proposed over the years. Some scholars point to the eruption of Red Mountain in Morrowind as a possible cause, a volcanic event so massive that it could have triggered earthquakes and tsunamis across the northern coast. However, when you examine the timeline carefully, the dates don't align perfectly. Others suggest it was indeed a magical accident from the college, perhaps involving experiments with reality-altering magic, or a summoning ritual that went catastrophically wrong. There are even theories based on cut content that suggest the player was originally meant to travel back in time during the college questline and inadvertently cause the Great Collapse, creating a time paradox. While none of these theories are confirmed in the game, the persistence of this mystery and the incomplete feeling of the college questline suggest there's more to this story than we're able to discover. Consider also the Karthwasten massacre. During the season unending quest, if you manage to secure a temporary truce in Skyrim's civil war, General Tullius mentions the Karthwasten massacre as one of the Stormcloak's alleged atrocities. He claims the Stormcloaks killed dozens of innocent civilians in the town of Karthwasten. However, when you visit Karthwasten yourself, you find a small mining settlement that shows no signs of any recent massacre. The town is intact, its residents alive and going about their business. No one mentions any recent tragedy. There are no graves, no memorials, no evidence that dozens of people were recently killed here. So what is General Tullius referring to? Several explanations are possible. The massacre could be Imperial propaganda designed to paint the Stormcloaks as villains, making it an entirely fabricated claim. It might have occurred long enough ago that the town has since rebuilt and repopulated, with the current residents being newcomers. Carthwayston could refer to a different location entirely, perhaps a settlement that was destroyed so completely that nothing remains. Or there could be more to the story that the game doesn't reveal. This disconnect between what we're told and what we can observe creates a mystery where there perhaps shouldn't be one, leaving players to wonder whether there's a deeper truth hidden somewhere, or if this is simply an inconsistency in the game's narrative. The Watcher in the Shadows. There's someone out there who knows more about you than they should. Shortly after you absorb your first dragon soul and demonstrate your power as Dragonborn, you receive a letter. A courier, appearing seemingly out of nowhere as couriers in Skyrim are wont to do, hands you a note. The message is brief but significant. It acknowledges that you've caused quite a stir by using the Thu'um, the dragon shouts. The writer notes that your return has made some people anxious, but they want to help you. They provide the location of a word wall, a place where you can learn more shouts. The letter is signed only as a friend. This would be unusual enough on its own, but it's just the beginning. Every time you use a shout in a major location, there's a chance you'll receive another letter from this mysterious friend. They always know exactly where you were and what you did, and they always provide information about another word wall. They never ask for anything in return, never reveal their identity, never explain how they're tracking your movements or why they want to help you. The letters simply arrive, regular as clockwork, evidence that someone somewhere is watching everything you do. The identity of this friend has been debated extensively by Skyrim's community. The most common theory points to the Blades, Delphine and Esbern, the two surviving members you meet during the main quest, would have both the knowledge of word walls and the motivation to help a new Dragonborn master their power. However, this theory has complications. The letters can arrive before you've met either Blade member, and they continue coming even after you've completed the main quest and established a relationship with them. If it were Delphine or Esbern sending the letters, why would they maintain the secrecy after you become allies? Another theory suggests the letters come from a greybeard, perhaps Arngir, who might be secretly helping you outside the formal training at High Hrothgar. The greybeards certainly have knowledge of word walls and have shown interest in your development. But this theory also faces issues. Arngir generally disapproves of using shouts for violence rather than meditation and inner peace. Would he really encourage you to seek out more shouts for combat? The letters also mention that not everyone is anxious for the return of the Dragonborn, a statement that seems to acknowledge conflict and danger, which doesn't align well with Arngir's philosophy of peaceful contemplation. Some players have proposed more esoteric possibilities. Could the friend be Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric Prince of Knowledge, who demonstrates a clear interest in the Dragonborn during the Dragonborn expansion? Perhaps it's Parthenax, the dragon who aids you, using a human intermediary to send the letters. These remain theories without confirmation, speculative attempts to explain an enigma that the game deliberately leaves unresolved. What makes this mystery particularly unnerving is the sheer scope of the friend's knowledge. They don't just know general things about you. They know specific locations where you've used shouts, including places that should be secret or inaccessible. Some players have reported receiving letters about shouts used in places like Sovngarde or the Soul Cairn, realms of the dead that exist outside normal reality. If these reports are accurate, it would suggest that either this friend has magical means of surveillance far beyond what any known character possesses, or they exist on a level of reality where even the boundaries between life and death, between the mortal realm and other planes of existence, pose no barrier to their awareness. And perhaps the most troubling question: if this friend is so knowledgeable, so well informed about your actions, and so committed to helping you grow stronger, what is their ultimate goal? Are they truly a friend, or are they cultivating your power for their own purposes? The letters never become sinister or threatening, but their very existence suggests a level of manipulation and observation that should give any dragonborn pause. Someone out there, in the shadows of Skyrim's politics and metaphysics, is pulling strings and watching your every move, and you may never know who they are or what they truly want from you. Artifacts of unknown purpose. Scattered throughout Skyrim are objects that defy explanation, items that seem significant but whose purpose and origin remain maddeningly unclear. Perhaps the most infamous of these are the bugs in jars. Throughout your travels, if you're thorough and perceptive, you'll find 5 glass jars, each containing a different insect: a butterfly, a bee, a dragonfly, a moth, and a torchbug. These aren't ordinary jars that might contain alchemy ingredients. They're sealed with mystical runes and emit a faint magical glow. Each jar is found in a different location, often in out-of-the-way places or hidden spots that suggest they were deliberately placed or concealed. For years, the Skyrim community worked tirelessly to uncover the meaning behind these jars. The runes on the lids seem to spell out cryptic messages. The locations where they were found seem to form a pattern on the map. Players theorized everything from elaborate alchemical formulas to summons for Daedric princes, from references to creation myths to warnings about future events. The mystery of the bug jars became one of Skyrim's most enduring enigmas, with entire forum threads and YouTube videos dedicated to decoding their secret. The disappointing truth, eventually revealed by a developer in an interview, was that the bug jars were remnants of cut content. There had been plans for a quest involving these items, but it was abandoned during development, and the jars were left in the game as orphaned assets. The supposed patterns and meanings players had found were largely coincidental, the product of human pattern recognition applied to something that had no intended pattern. And yet, the mystery lingers. Knowing that the developers didn't finish the content doesn't tell us what that content was supposed to be. What was the quest going to involve? What role were these mystical insect-containing jars going to play? The jars still exist in the game, still sitting in their strange locations, still glowing with their faint magic, still sealed with their runic inscriptions, artifacts of a story that was never told. Consider the notched pickaxe, found embedded in the highest peak in Skyrim, at the summit of the throat of the world. This unique pickaxe bears an enchantment that improves smithing, but its placement raises questions. Why is there a pickaxe at the top of this sacred mountain? A place visited only by the Greybeards and now by the Dragonborn. Who left it there? The item's name is a reference to Notch, the creator of Minecraft, suggesting it's an Easter egg placed by the developers. But within the game's lore, the presence of this enchanted tool at the summit of Skyrim's holiest mountain remains unexplained. Did some ancient smith make a pilgrimage to the peak? Was it left there by a greybeard who once had a life before joining the monastery? Or is it truly just a game developer's joke? An item that exists outside the lore and logic of the world? The headsman's axe that you'll inevitably see at the beginning of the game, moments before Alduin attacks Helgen and saves you from execution, carries its own mystery. This particular axe can be picked up and kept, and it has unusual properties. Unlike every other weapon in the game, the headsman's axe can't be improved at a grindstone. It's locked at its base stats permanently. Why? There's no lore explanation for this restriction. Some players have theorized that it's meant to represent the axe's symbolic importance as the tool that was about to end your life, an artifact forever frozen at that moment of near death. Others suggest it's simply a developer oversight, a flag applied to ensure the axe appears correctly in the execution scene that was never removed. Either way, the axe's unique inability to be improved sets it apart from every other weapon and raises questions about its nature. Then, there are the mysterious patterns found throughout Rorikstead. If you explore this small farming village thoroughly, you'll find soul gems in almost every house. Farmers, innkeepers, ordinary citizens who wouldn't normally have use for these magical items all have them tucked away in their homes. Rorikstead is also notably prosperous, despite its remote location and the harsh climate of the Reach. The village elder, Juan Manet, seems to know more than he's willing to share. If you pay attention to various books and dialogue scattered throughout Skyrim, you'll find hints that some believe Rorikstead might be connected to Daedric worship or unusual magical practices that ensure good harvests and long life. However, the game never makes any of this explicit. There's no quest that investigates Rorikstead's secrets, no revelation about what the villagers might be doing with those soul gems, no confrontation with whatever entity they might be paying homage to. The evidence is entirely circumstantial, implications and suggestions rather than facts. It's entirely possible to play through Skyrim without noticing anything unusual about Rorikstead, except that it's a successful farm town. But once you start looking closely, once you start finding soul gems in places they have no obvious reason to be, and noticing the subtle hints dropped in environmental storytelling and dialogue, you realize that something could be deeply wrong in this idyllic village. What makes Rorikstead's potential mystery even more unsettling is that, unlike Skyrim's many other dark secrets that eventually reveal themselves through quests, these shadows remain perpetually hidden, acknowledged only through clues that never lead to any resolution. The giant painted cow represents a curious phenomenon that players often encounter without fully understanding what they're witnessing. Sometimes, while traveling Skyrim's roads, you'll see a farmer leading a cow with strange, glowing blue markings painted on its hide. If you follow this farmer, he'll lead the cow to a giant camp and present it as an offering. The giants will accept the cow peacefully. The farmer will leave unharmed, and that's the end of it. But what's actually happening here? The most logical explanation is that the farmers are paying tribute to the giants to keep them from attacking their villages. The painted markings could be some form of sacred symbol that the giants recognize as designating an offering. This would suggest an established arrangement between the two groups, a form of protection payment that benefits both sides. The giants get regular food without having to hunt or raid, and the farmers avoid having their settlements destroyed. However, the game never explains how this arrangement came about, how the farmers know which markings to use, or what the giants' perspective on all this might be. The encounter simply exists, a glimpse of a cultural exchange we can observe but never fully understand. Ghosts and apparitions. The supernatural runs deep in Skyrim, and nowhere is this more evident than in the various spirits and ghosts that haunt the province. These aren't simple hostile spirits that attack on sight. Many of them seem to have purpose, motivation, and stories that we can only partially understand. Throughout your travel, you might encounter a ghost by the roadside, translucent and silent. If you approach, the ghost won't attack or speak. Instead, it will begin to walk, leading you away from the road into the wilderness. If you're patient enough to follow, the ghost will eventually lead you to its grave, which is being desecrated by bandits or treasure hunters. The implication is clear. The spirit cannot rest while its grave is being violated, and it's asking you for help. If you dispatch the grave robbers, the ghost will vanish, presumably finding peace at last. But this raises fascinating questions about the nature of death and the afterlife in Skyrim. What allows some spirits to manifest and interact with the living world, while others cannot? What determines which souls remain bound to their graves and which move on to whatever afterlife awaits them? And most intriguingly, how do these ghosts know to seek out the Dragonborn specifically? You're not the only person traveling Skyrim's roads. Why don't they try to get help from other travelers? The ghost of Hamvir's Rest presents its own enigma. This small graveyard in the frozen waste becomes the destination of a spectral horseman that some players report seeing riding through Skyrim at night. The horseman never attacks, never speaks, simply rides through the darkness until he reaches Hamvir's Rest, where he'll circle the area before eventually disappearing. But who was this rider in life? One popular theory among players suggests he might be Ragnar the Red, a warrior mentioned in a song that bards sing throughout Skyrim. The song tells of Ragnar's death by decapitation at the hands of a shield maiden named Matilda. Since the spectral rider appears headless, this connection seems plausible. However, if it is Ragnar, several questions remain unanswered. Why does he ride to Hamvir's Rest specifically? What's his connection to that location? And if it's not Ragnar, then who is this headless ghost? And what is he searching for in his eternal ride through the night? The game provides no definitive answers, leaving the horseman's identity as one of Skyrim's enduring mysteries. At Ingol Barrow, east of Windhelm, players encounter one of Skyrim's most atmospheric locations. This ancient Nordic tomb is unique because, unlike most barrows filled with hostile Draugr from the start, Ingol Barrow is initially peaceful. As you descend into its depths, mysterious glowing orbs of light follow you, illuminating your path through the foggy chambers. The atmosphere is ethereal and haunting rather than overtly threatening. Only at the very end do you encounter combat in the form of Ingol's Shade, the Barrow's guardian, who rises to defend the tomb from intruders. But what are those glowing orbs? They behave almost like will-o'-the-wisps, dancing through the fog and darkness, yet they don't match the description of any known magical phenomenon in Skyrim's lore? Are they the spirits of those buried in the barrow, watching a living intruder navigate their resting place? Are they some form of ancient Nordic magic meant to guide visitors or confuse them? The fact that they don't attack, don't hinder your progress, and simply follow alongside you makes their purpose unclear. They're beautiful and eerie, creating an atmosphere unlike any other dungeon in the game, but their nature and origin remain completely unexplained. The case of Medresi Dran at Angarwunde presents a different sort of puzzle. When you enter this remote ruin in the southeastern corner of Skyrim, one of the first things you'll see is a corpse impaled on a spike trap, a warning about the dangers that lie ahead. If you examine the body, you'll discover it's Medresi Dran, a Dunmer explorer. Her death serves as a grim tutorial about watching for traps. What makes this notable is that Medresi Dran can also be encountered alive in certain situations, depending on the order in which you discover locations and complete quests. This creates an unusual situation where the same character can exist in different states, though this is most likely the result of how the game handles quest timing and NPC placement, rather than any intentional mystery. It's one of those odd quirks that emerges from the complex systems governing Skyrim's world, where different elements don't always perfectly align. Consider the Pale Lady, a unique spirit encountered in Frostmere Crypt. This ghostly figure is connected to a sword called the Pale Blade, which has been driving bandits mad with its dark influence. When you finally confront the Pale Lady in the depths of the crypt, she appears as a spectral woman radiating cold and despair. Defeating her frees the bandits from the sword's curse, but it also raises questions about who she was in life. The sword seems to be her phylactery, the vessel containing her spirit. Was she a powerful mage who bound herself to the blade, a victim of some ancient ritual? The game provides no backstory for the Pale Lady, no explanation of how she came to be trapped in that sword, or why the blade drives its wielders to madness. She's simply there, a boss encounter without a history, a mystery that presents itself as a fight rather than a story. Hidden agendas and betrayals. Trust is a rare commodity in Skyrim, and many of the people you meet are not what they first appear to be. Take Gulumai, the Argonian informant you deal with during the Thieves Guild quest line. This smooth-talking smuggler seems like a typical underworld contact, someone who trades in information and stolen goods. But paying close attention to his dialogue and background reveals hints that he's connected to something much larger and darker than ordinary crime. He mentions connections that extend beyond Skyrim's borders, speaks of operations that suggest organization and planning far beyond what a simple smuggler should possess. Yet the game never fully reveals the extent of Gulum Ai's network or who he's ultimately working for. He remains a useful contact for the Thieves Guild, his deeper connections hinted at but never explored. The case of Alva in Morthal presents a more overt but equally troubling mystery. This Nord woman appears to be a normal citizen until you investigate a series of house fires plaguing the town. The investigation reveals that Alva is actually a vampire who has been secretly seducing and controlling the town's guards and citizens, using them for food and planning to eventually take over Morthal entirely. She's working with Movarth, an ancient vampire master who dwells in nearby Movarth's lair. But how long has this been going on? How many people has Alva turned or killed without anyone noticing? And what about her relationship with Hrogar? A widower she seduced after his wife and daughter died in a fire. Did Alva cause that fire to eliminate Hrogar's family so she could claim him for herself? The quest resolves with Alva's death, but many questions about her activities and the full extent of her influence in Morthal are never answered. Septimus Cygnus, the mad scholar you meet during the main quest line, presents one of Skyrim's most disturbing examples of hidden manipulation. When you first encounter him in his remote ice cave, he seems to be simply an eccentric researcher obsessed with the Dwemer. He tasked you with helping him access a Dwemer lockbox, and you spend considerable effort gathering the components he needs. Only as the quest progresses do you realize that Septimus is completely insane, driven mad by his communion with Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric Prince of Knowledge. He's not just studying the Dwemer. He's a puppet dancing on strings, held by an entity that views mortals as nothing more than interesting specimens. But here's what makes Septimus truly disturbing. How long has he been under Hermaeus Mora's influence? His insanity seems complete by the time you meet him, suggesting he's been this way for years. How many other scholars or adventurers has he sent on dangerous tasks before you? The ice cave is littered with the remains of Dwemer automatons and other creatures, suggesting many violent encounters. Were there others who came to Septimus seeking knowledge and ended up as pawns in Hermaeus Mora's games? And what about Septimus's life before the madness? The game never tells us who he was before he became the wild-eyed hermit living in an ice cave, scrawling incomprehensible notes about the Dwemer and serving a Daedric prince. His past, his original purpose, his journey from scholar to madman, all of it remains hidden behind the veil of his insanity. The Greybeards themselves harbour mysteries that many players never consider. These monks have devoted their entire lives to the way of the voice, a philosophy of using the Thu'um only for meditation and worship, rather than as a weapon. They live in complete isolation at the top of High Hrothgar, rarely interacting with the outside world. But where do they come from? How are new Greybeards recruited? The only one we ever see join their ranks is Ulfric Stormcloak during his youth, and he eventually left. What made these individual men choose to abandon the entire world and climb a mountain to spend the rest of their lives in silent contemplation? And there's a darker question lurking beneath the peaceful surface of High Hrothgar. What happened to Jurgen Windcaller, the ancient hero who founded the Greybeards' philosophy? He's buried in a tomb beneath the monastery, but the circumstances of his death are never explained. For a man who believed the Thu'um should be used peacefully, his tomb is protected by powerful shouts and guarded by his undead spirit, which will attack intruders. Why? If Jurgen truly believed in peace and meditation, why does his ghost violently defend his resting place? The contradiction between his philosophy and his restless spirit suggests there's more to Jurgen Windcaller's story than the Greybeards have shared. Secrets buried with him in that coal stone tomb. Consider the Sigic Order, the mysterious mage organization that appears briefly during the College of Winterhold questline. These powerful mages manifest as translucent apparitions, speaking to you about the Eye of Magnus and warning about its dangers. They help you at crucial moments, providing guidance and assistance. But who are they really? The Sigic Order is supposed to be an ancient and secretive organization that disappeared from Tamriel centuries ago. retreating to their hidden island of Artaeum. Yet here they are, manifesting in Skyrim, interfering in events. How are they doing this? Are these truly the Psijics? Or is something else pretending to be them? What is their ultimate goal with the Eye of Magnus? The questline ends with the Psijic Order taking the Eye of Magnus to safeguard it, removing it from reality entirely. But that raises a troubling question. What makes the Psijics qualified to guard such a powerful and dangerous artifact? They claim they're acting to prevent others from misusing the Eye, but they're incredibly powerful mages with their own agenda and goals. What's to stop them from using the Eye themselves? The game treats them as benevolent helpers, but their motives, their methods, and what they truly intend to do with the Eye of Magnus remain completely opaque. They vanish as mysteriously as they appeared, taking with them an artifact of immense power and leaving behind only questions about their true nature and intentions. The holes in history. Skyrim's history, like any history, is full of gaps, contradictions, and events that don't quite make sense when you examine them closely. Take the Dragon Crisis itself. Dragons vanished from Tamriel thousands of years ago, hunted to near extinction during the Dragon War. For millennia, they existed only as legends, as bones buried in ancient barrows, as carvings on walls warning of a time when great worms ruled the skies. Yet during the events of Skyrim, they return, led by Alduin, the World Eater himself. But how? The answer given by the game is that Alduin was thrown forward through time by the ancient Nord heroes using an Elder Scroll. He emerged in the present day and began resurrecting other dragons from their burial mounds. But this explanation raises as many questions as it answers. First, if Alduin was simply displaced in time rather than being killed or truly banished, why did his absence break the other dragon's power? Once Alduin was gone, the remaining dragons were hunted down and destroyed. But if their leader was just lost to time, wouldn't they have continued to be immortal, unkillable beings? The Dragon War suggests that without Alduin, dragons can be permanently killed. But why? What makes Alduin's presence necessary for their immortality? Furthermore, the ancient Nords who banished Alduin used an Elder Scroll, artifacts of immense and unpredictable power. Did they know sending Alduin forward in time would eventually bring him back? Or was it an act of desperation, simply removing the threat from their time without considering the consequences for the future? The temporal mechanics of Alduin's banishment and return are never fully explained, leaving a gap in the historical record that's particularly glaring given how central this event is to the main storyline. The fate of the Snow Elves, who became the farmer, is well documented in Skyrim's lore, but significant details remain murky. When the ancient Nords came to Skyrim, they found the Snow Elves already living there, an advanced and cultured elven civilization. Conflict erupted, as it often does when two peoples compete for the same land. The Nords, with their superior numbers and strength in warfare, began to overwhelm the Snow Elves. In desperation, the Snow Elves turned to the Dwemer, seeking refuge in their underground cities. The Dwemer agreed to take them in, but at a terrible price. The Snow Elves were forced to consume a toxic fungus that eventually rendered them blind and twisted their bodies and minds. Over generations, they devolved from a proud civilization into the feral, savage Falmer that now infests Skyrim's underground passages. This is the accepted history, found in books and spoken of by scholars. But why? Why would the Dwemer do this? What did they gain from transforming the snow elves into blind slaves? The Dwemer were logical and pragmatic. Surely they could have simply accepted the snow elves as refugees or as allied people without poisoning and enslaving them. What motivated such extreme and cruel treatment? Some theories suggest the Dwemer needed the labor and wanted to ensure the snow elves couldn't rebel or leave. Others propose that the Dwemer were conducting experiments, using the snow elves as test subjects for something related to their attempt to achieve godhood. But the game never confirms any of these theories, leaving the Dwemer's motivation for creating the former as one of the many mysteries surrounding that vanished race. The circumstances surrounding the death of King Torygg raise political questions that the Civil War questline never fully addresses. Ulfric Stormcloak, Jarl of Windhelm, challenged High King Torygg to single combat in solitude. This was within Ulfric's rights under Nord tradition. Any worthy warrior could challenge the king to prove their strength and claim leadership. Torygg, young and relatively inexperienced in combat, accepted the challenge. Also as tradition demanded, Ulfric defeated and killed him using the Thu'um, the dragon shouts, to literally shout Torygg apart. The controversy lies in whether Ulfric's use of the Thu'um made the duel unfair. Some say that using shouts gave Ulfric an overwhelming advantage, making it less a fair fight and more an execution. Others argue that in a challenge to the death, any tool or skill at the warrior's disposal is legitimate. But here's the question that never gets satisfactorily answered. What did Torygg think about all this? We hear from his court, from his wife, from his supporters and detractors, but we never truly understand Torygg's own perspective. Did he know Ulfric could use shouts? Did he accept the challenge knowing he would likely die? What were his final thoughts as Ulfric's voice tore him apart? There's a scene in Sovngarde, the Nordic afterlife, where you can potentially meet Torygg's spirit if you look carefully. But he has minimal dialogue and doesn't discuss his death or his feelings about the civil war that his murder sparked. For a character whose death is the catalyst for Skyrim's entire political upheaval, Torygg himself remains strangely undefined, more of a symbol than a person. What kind of king was he? What were his policies, his hopes for Skyrim's future, his relationship with the Empire? These questions go unanswered, leaving a void at the center of Skyrim's Civil War narrative. The Forsworn, the native Reachmen, who wage a guerrilla war against Nordic rule in the Reach, have a history that the game presents as straightforward, but is actually much more complex. According to the Nords, the Forsworn are terrorists and savages who attack innocent people and worship Daedra. According to the Forsworn themselves, they're freedom fighters trying to reclaim their ancestral homeland from foreign occupiers. The truth, as is often the case, lies somewhere in the muddy middle ground between these positions. But what's rarely discussed is how the Forsworn came to be in their current situation in the first place. The Reachmen are described as being native to the Reach, yet Skyrim has been Nordic territory for thousands of years. Were the Reachmen there before the Nords arrived in the Merethic era? If so, they've been displaced for an incredibly long time. Or are they descended from mixed populations, Bretons or others who settled in the Reach during more recent times and developed their own distinct culture? The game's lore doesn't provide a clear answer. treating the Forsworn's claim to the Reach as both ancient and somehow recent simultaneously. Furthermore, the Forsworn conspiracy quest in Markarth reveals that the Forsworn actually briefly controlled the Reach during the Great War, when Imperial forces were pulled away to fight the Thalmor. A Forsworn leader named Madnak seized Markarth and held it for a time. But the circumstances of how they took the city and how they were eventually removed are never fully detailed. The Nords imply it was a violent uprising and a violent suppression. The Forsworn frame it as a temporary reclamation of their homeland. The reality of what happened during those chaotic years remains deliberately vague, with both sides telling versions of history that serve their narratives rather than objective truth. Unanswered artifacts. Beyond the bug jars, Skyrim contains numerous other artifacts whose purpose, origin, or significance remains unclear. The runed lexicon you obtain from Septimus Signus is described as a Dwemer device for storing information, but its actual function is never demonstrated in a way that makes sense. You use it to transcribe the contents of the Ogma Infinium, Hermaeus Mora's artifact, but how exactly does a Dwemer device interface with a Daedric artifact? The Dwemer didn't worship the Daedra, and generally regarded them with suspicion or indifference. Why would they create a tool capable of interacting with Daedric magic? The Elder Scrolls themselves present a fascinating problem. These artifacts are supposed to be incredibly dangerous to read, capable of driving readers mad or striking them blind, even when those readers are specially trained moth priests who have devoted their lives to interpreting the scrolls. Yet the Dragonborn reads an Elder Scroll atop the throat of the world, with no preparation, no training, and suffers absolutely no ill effects. Parthenax, the ancient dragon who guides you, expresses surprise that you're able to read it at all, but neither he nor anyone else ever explains why you're immune to the scroll's normally devastating effects. The Heart of Lorcan, mentioned frequently in connection with the Dwemer, but never actually seen in Skyrim, remains one of the Elder Scrolls universe's greatest mysteries. According to mythology, Lorcan was the god who tricked the other Aedra into creating the mortal realm of Mundus. As punishment, they tore out his heart and cast it down to Nirn, where it became a source of immense power. The Dwemer found it and attempted to use it to achieve godhood, which is likely what caused their disappearance. The Tribunal of Morrowind used it to become living gods. Dagoth used it to create a threat that nearly destroyed Morrowind in the events of the Elder Scrolls III. But where is the heart now? The events of Morrowind supposedly severed all connection to it, rendering it inert or perhaps destroying it entirely. But can the heart of a dead god truly be destroyed? And, if it still exists somewhere, what state is it in? What would happen if someone found it again? The fact that such an immensely powerful and dangerous artifact might still be out there, somewhere, with no clear indication of its status or location, is both intriguing and terrifying. It's a loose thread in the world's cosmology, a weapon of godlike power that might be dormant, destroyed, or simply waiting for someone foolish enough to seek it out again. The Ethereum Forge, a Dwemer construct of incredible sophistication, represents the pinnacle of their technological achievement. This forge could smelt Ethereum, a rare and powerful material, into artifacts of unique properties. The Dawnguard DLC allows you to restore and use the forge, creating one of several powerful items. But the mysteries surrounding the forge go beyond its function. Why was it hidden away and its location obscured even from other Dwemer? What made Ethereum so special and so dangerous that the Dwemer who knew of the forge's location deliberately destroyed the records? The ghost of Katria, a Nord adventurer who died trying to reach the forge, guides you in its discovery. But even she doesn't fully understand what the Dwemer were doing with Ethereum, or why they went to such lengths to hide the forge. The items you can create, the ethereal crown, shield, and staff, are powerful, certainly, but they don't seem world-shattering enough to justify the level of secrecy and protection the Dwemer placed around the forge. This suggests there's something about Ethereum, or the forge itself, that we don't understand. Some property or potential that remains hidden even after we've restored and used it. Consider the Ogma Infinium itself, the artifact of Hermaeus Mora that grants immense knowledge to whoever reads it. The book has the power to significantly advance your skills and make you measurably more powerful in an instant. But what exactly is happening when you read it? The book supposedly contains all the knowledge Hermaeus Mora has accumulated about a particular subject, compressed into a form that a mortal mind can absorb. But how does that work? How can reading words on pages literally make you better at lockpicking or speech or conjuration? It's not teaching you in the traditional sense. You don't learn techniques or practice skills. The knowledge simply transfers into you. This raises disturbing questions about the nature of knowledge and skill in Tamriel. If reading a book can make you better at a physical skill like archery without any practice, what does that say about the relationship between mind and body in this world? Are skills actually stored as something that can be transferred, like pouring water from one container to another? And if so, what are the implications? Could someone theoretically extract skills and knowledge from others? When Hermaeus Mora collects knowledge from mortals, is he literally taking it from them, leaving them diminished? The mechanics of how the Ogma Infinium works suggest a cosmology where mental and physical abilities are far more fluid and transferable than we might assume. But the game never explores these implications. The Black Star, or Azura's Star, present a moral and metaphysical puzzle. Both are grand soul gems that never break and can be refilled infinitely, making them among the most valuable items in the game for enchanters. The difference between them is that Azura's Star can only hold white souls, the souls of animals and monsters, while the Black Star can hold black souls, the souls of sentient beings like humans and elves. You choose which version you want to create during Azura's quest. But here's the disturbing part that's never fully addressed. What does it mean to trap a sentient soul? Soul gems are used to power enchantments, essentially consuming the soul in the process. When you trap a bandit's soul in the Black Star and use it to enchant a sword, what happens to that bandit's consciousness? Is there an afterlife for them? Do they experience the torment of being used as magical fuel? Or does the soul simply cease to exist once it's consumed? The game treats soul gems as a mundane magical resource, but the ethical and metaphysical implications of soul trapping are horrifying when you think about them, and they're never really explored beyond Azura's disapproval of black soul gems. Architectural impossibilities. Skyrim's buildings and structures sometimes defy logic in ways that go beyond simple game limitations. Take Solitude, the capital city. If you pay attention to the building's exteriors versus their interiors, you'll notice something odd. Many buildings are much larger on the inside than they appear from outside. The Blue Palace, in particular, has a sprawling interior full of rooms, halls, and multiple floors that shouldn't physically fit within the building's exterior dimensions. Is this just a concession to game design, allowing for more interesting interior spaces? Or is there actually magical expansion at work, like the medieval concept of extra-dimensional spaces? The game never addresses this, leaving players to wonder if spatial manipulation magic is common enough that people just casually use it for their homes, or if it's an artifact of the game's construction that we're supposed to ignore. But if we accept it as real within the game world, it raises questions about the limits and availability of such magic. Why do some buildings have it and others don't? Why isn't it used more extensively? If you can make a building's interior larger than its exterior, why are there homeless people in Skyrim cities at all? The entrance to Skyhaven Temple presents a different architectural mystery. This ancient blade sanctuary is hidden within a mountain in the Reach, accessible only by solving a blood seal puzzle on what appears to be a natural rock face. But the blood seal itself is a sophisticated security system that predates the current blades by thousands of years, dating back to the Akaviri, the mysterious Eastern people who founded the Blades organization. The seal requires blood from someone of dragon blood, specifically a dragonborn, to open. But how did the Akaviri know about dragonborn? And why would they build a security system that requires someone with this specific bloodline? The dragonborn are rare, appearing in different families across generations with no clear hereditary pattern. What happened if a generation passed without a dragonborn? Was the temple simply inaccessible until one happened to be born? Or was there another way to open it that's been lost to time? The temple's very existence implies a level of foreknowledge or prophecy that the Akaviri possessed, but that isn't explained anywhere in the game's lore. The various barrows and Nordic tombs scattered throughout Skyrim contain their own architectural puzzles. Many of these tombs have been sealed for thousands of years, yet they're full of lit torches and burning braziers. Who lights them? How have these flames stayed lit for millennia? Some theorize it's magic, eternal flames created by ancient priests to honor their dead. But if the Nords had access to such magic, why don't we see it used anywhere else? And more practically, how do the Draga that inhabit these tombs maintain the lighting? Speaking of Draga, their very existence raises questions. These undead creatures guard the tombs, maintaining the structures and protecting the dead from intruders. But they're not mindless zombies. They patrol specific routes, maintain weapons and armor, and even seem to perform basic upkeep on the tombs. Some barrows have areas that show signs of recent activity, fireplaces with fresh ash, tables with food that hasn't rotted, areas that are suspiciously free of dust and cobwebs despite supposedly being sealed for ages. This suggests the Draga have some level of intelligence and capability beyond what we typically see when we fight them. Are they aware? Do they remember their lives before death? What's it like to exist as a Draga, locked in a tomb for eternity, your only purpose to pace the same halls and fight the occasional adventurer who breaks in? The game presents them as simple enemy encounters, but the evidence of their activities suggests they have a much more complex existence than we're shown in combat. The doors in Nordic barrows present another oddity. They often have elaborate puzzles that can only be solved from the inside, yet they're designed to be unlocked by someone approaching from the outside. This has led to many jokes about ancient Nords being idiots who locked themselves in their own tombs, but there might be a more sinister explanation. Perhaps these puzzles weren't meant to keep people out, but to keep something in. Maybe the complex mechanisms and the puzzle doors were designed by those who sealed the tombs to prevent the Draga inside from ever getting out. The fact that you can solve them from the outside might be an unfortunate side effect of the door needing to be openable for maintenance or emergencies, not the primary purpose of the security. The Civil War's loose ends. Skyrim's civil war between the Imperial Legion and the Stormcloaks is presented as one of the major conflicts in the game, yet it's full of inconsistencies and unanswered questions. Regardless of which side you choose, the war ends relatively cleanly, with one faction defeated and the other victorious. But what happens next? The game provides almost no epilogue for the Civil War's conclusion. If the Stormcloaks win, how does Skyrim function as an independent nation? What's their relationship with the Empire? With the other provinces? Do the Jarls who were replaced harbour resentment or plot to reclaim their holds? If the Empire wins, does that really solve anything? The Thalmor, who manipulated events to start the Civil War in the first place, are still out there, still enforcing the White Gold Concordat, still hunting Talos worshippers. The whole reason the Stormcloaks rebelled was opposition to Thalmor influence and the banning of Talos worship. An imperial victory doesn't address these fundamental grievances. It just forces the Nords to live under a system they see as oppressive. Does this mean another rebellion is inevitable? Furthermore, the game reveals through documents found during the diplomatic immunity quest that the Thalmor have been deliberately prolonging the civil war. They don't particularly care who wins. They just want both sides to continue fighting and weakening each other. Their ideal scenario is a forever war that bleeds Skyrim and the Empire without resolution. When you end the war by helping one side achieve total victory, you're actually working against the Thalmor's plans. But the game never shows the consequences of this. The Thalmor don't react to the war's end. There's no follow-up quest or dialogue addressing how your actions have disrupted their long-term strategy. The season unending quest, which can be skipped entirely if you finish the Civil War before tackling the main quest, presents an interesting what-if scenario. In this quest, you broker a temporary truce to deal with the dragon threat. Both sides sit down at High Hrothgar and negotiate terms. But the negotiations feel hollow, because you know that as soon as a dragon crisis is resolved, the war will resume exactly as before. The temporary truce doesn't address any of the underlying issues. It's just a pause button on the conflict. And what makes this particularly frustrating is that you, the Dragonborn, are shown to have tremendous influence. You've killed dragons, mastered the Thu'um, and accomplished feats that make you one of the most powerful individuals in Tamriel. Yet you can't leverage this influence to create a lasting peace. The game railroad you into, either choosing a side in the war or maintaining a meaningless temporary truce with no option to actually resolve the conflict's root causes. The role of the Thalmor embassy in Skyrim raises additional questions. This heavily fortified compound serves as the Aldmeri Dominion's base of operations in Skyrim. During the Diplomatic Immunity quest, you infiltrate it and discover extensive intelligence files on various individuals in Skyrim, including Ulfric Stormcloak himself. The files reveal that Ulfric was captured during the war with the Aldmeri Dominion and was interrogated, possibly tortured, and then released. The Thalmor consider him an asset, though it's unclear whether he's willingly working with them or simply being manipulated. This information could be explosive if revealed to the people of Skyrim. Ulfric's entire rebellion is based on his staunch opposition to the Thalmor. If his followers knew he had been compromised by them, even unwittingly, it would destroy his credibility and possibly end the Stormcloak cause. But the game gives you no option to actually use this information. You can't show Ulfric supporters evidence that their leader has been played by the very enemies he claims to oppose. You can't confront Ulfric himself with proof of his connection to the Thalmor. The devastating intelligence you gathered during the embassy infiltration has no impact on the larger narrative. It's just there, sitting in your quest journal, a bombshell that you're never allowed to detonate. The mysteries of mortality and death. Death in Skyrim isn't always permanent, and the rules governing who can die, who stays dead, and who returns seem arbitrary at best. Essential NPCs can't be killed by you or by enemies, a practical game design choice to prevent players from breaking quests. But within the world, this invincibility is never explained. Characters who should logically be vulnerable to death survive situations that would kill anyone else. They can be stabbed, burned, frozen, or thrown off cliffs, and they'll simply fall unconscious for a moment before getting back up, completely fine. The mechanism of resurrection in Skyrim is particularly inconsistent. Alduin can resurrect dragons from their burial mounds, bringing them back to full life. The ideal masters can trap souls in soul gems, and necromancers can animate corpses. But what's the difference between these various forms of life after death? When Alduin resurrects a dragon, is he restoring the dragon's original consciousness? Or is he creating something new that just has the dragon's memories? Are the resurrected dragons aware they died? Do they remember the thousands of years they spent as bones in the ground? Similarly, what happens to people who are killed and then resurrected by magic? If you die in combat and reload your save, that's a metagame action. But within the world of Skyrim, resurrection magic exists. It's powerful and rare, but it's possible. What would it be like to be brought back from death? What do you experience in those moments between dying and being restored? Do you see an afterlife? Or is it just blackness, an absence of existence? The game includes numerous afterlives, Sovngarde for honorable Nords, the Soulcairn for trapped souls, various Daedric realms for those who serve the princes. But the relationship between death, resurrection, and these afterlives is never clearly defined. The Dark Brotherhood's relationship with death is particularly interesting. As assassins, they're professional killers, and they worship the dread Father Sithis, who represents the void, the emptiness before creation. But what does Sithis actually want? The Night Mother, the spirit who leads the Dark Brotherhood, claims to speak for Sithis, giving the Brotherhood their contracts. But is she actually communicating with a sentient entity? Or is she just insane, hearing voices that aren't there? Other characters in the Brotherhood seem to believe she's genuinely in contact with Sithis. but no one outside the Brotherhood can hear her or verify her claims. Furthermore, what happens to people killed by the Dark Brotherhood? In a world with multiple afterlives, where do their souls go? Does performing the Black Sacrament, the ritual to contact the Brotherhood, have any effect on the victim's soul? You're not just paying to have someone killed. You're performing a dark ritual involving flesh and bones and mystical symbols. That suggests the assassination is more than just murder. It's a spiritual act with consequences beyond the physical death. But those consequences are never explored or explained. The existence of vampirism and lycanthropy raises questions about the nature of the soul. Both conditions are curses that transform the afflicted, changing not just their bodies, but seemingly their very nature. Vampires in Skyrim are undead, yet they maintain their personalities, memories, and identities. They're not shambling corpses like Draugr or zombies. They're people who happen to be dead but still walking around. What does that do to the soul? When a vampire is killed, where does their soul go? They're already dead, so can they die again? Or is destroying a vampire less like killing and more like ending a prolonged state of not quite death? Lycanthropy complicates matters further. Werewolves aren't undead. They're living people who can transform into beasts. But the transformation seems to involve more than just a physical change. Werewolves speak of the beast within, of losing control to animalistic urges. Are there actually two consciousnesses in a werewolf's mind, the human and the beast? Or is it one consciousness that's altered by the curse? And what about Hircine's claim on werewolf souls? The Daedric Prince of the Hunt considers all werewolves to belong to him, doomed to spend eternity hunting in his realm. But can a Daedric Prince really lay claim to someone's soul just because they're cursed? What if the werewolf also worships a different deity, or has served a different prince? Who gets the soul then? Children and their absence. One of Skyrim's most noticeable oddities is the limited presence of children. Only human races, Nords, Imperials, Bretons and Redguards have children visible in the game. Elves, Khajiit, Argonians and Orcs are entirely absent in child form. From a development perspective, creating child models for every race would have required significant additional work. But this practical design decision creates an unusual situation within the game world where entire races appear to have no children, or at least none that we ever see. In Orc strongholds, NPCs talk about raising strong children and maintaining their bloodlines, yet not a single Orc child exists in the game. In Windhelm's Grey Quarter, where dozens of Dunmer live crowded together, there are no Dunmer children. In Riften, where the Khajiit caravans camp outside the city, you'll never see a young Khajiit. The absence is particularly noticeable in places like Raven Rock on Solstheim, an entire town populated by dark elves, where the youngest looking character is still clearly an adult. If we were to try explaining this within the game's lore, rather than attributing it to development limitations, we'd have to consider some unsettling possibilities. Are the children kept hidden for some reason? Do non-human races age differently, perhaps remaining with their parents in other locations until they reach adulthood? Or is something about Skyrim itself preventing these races from having children in the province? The lack of explanation transforms what should be a minor background detail into an odd demographic mystery, though in reality, it's simply one of those practical concessions that games must make. The children that do exist in Skyrim behave in often inexplicable ways. In Honor Hall Orphanage in Riften, children are supposedly being cared for by Grelod the Kind, who is actually a cruel woman who abuses and terrorizes them. The Dark Brotherhood questline allows you to assassinate Grelod at the request of a young boy named Aventus Aretino, who performed the Black Sacrament to contact the Brotherhood. After Grelod's death, Constance Michael takes over the orphanage and treats the children well. But this raises questions about Skyrim's child welfare systems. How did Grelod's abuse go unreported for so long? Riften is full of people, including guards and officials who should have noticed. Are we to believe no adult in the city cared enough to investigate? Or was Grelod's position so secure that no one could touch her? And what about Aventus Aretino himself? This child performed a forbidden ritual to contact a murder cult and successfully got them to kill someone. He's maybe 10 years old. Where did he learn about the Black Sacrament? How did he gather the materials needed to perform it? And what are the consequences of a child successfully hiring assassins? The game treats it as a dark joke, but the implications are horrifying when you think about them seriously. Another notable element is that children in Skyrim are completely invulnerable. They cannot be harmed by anything, not by you, not by enemies, not by environmental hazards. This is a practical development choice that any game with children must make, as allowing harm to children would create serious moral and ethical concerns. But from a world-building perspective, it creates some unusual situations. Children can be present during dragon attacks or battles and emerge without a scratch. They can wander into dangerous situations without consequence. While this is clearly a necessary game mechanic rather than a lore element, it does mean that children in Skyrim exist in a somewhat different reality than adult characters, protected by forces that operate outside the game's normal rules. It's one of those invisible boundaries that we accept as players while understanding it exists for very good reasons beyond the story itself. And so, cozy nights, we reach the end of our journey through Skyrim's Unsolved Mysteries, though in truth, we've barely scratched the surface. For every enigma we've discussed tonight, there are a dozen more lurking in forgotten barrows, whispered in tavern corners, or hidden in the subtext of casual conversations. Skyrim is a land where answers beget only more questions, where every solution reveals a deeper puzzle, where the line between fact and legend blurs like footprints in fresh snow. These mysteries may never be solved. Perhaps they were never meant to be. Perhaps their purpose is not to provide answers, but to remind us that even in a world we can explore from edge to edge, even in a game whose code can be dissected and examined, there are still spaces for wonder, for uncertainty, for the delicious unease of not quite knowing. The unknown doesn't diminish our adventures in Skyrim. It enriches them, adding layers of depth and possibility to every stone we overturn, every scroll we read, every stranger we meet on lonely roads. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, let your mind wander through snowy mountain passes where ghosts ride headless horses, through ancient ruins where the Dwemer vanished between one heartbeat and the next, through the shadows of cities where everyone has a secret and no one is quite what they seem. Let the mysteries cradle you like a warm cloak against the cold, knowing that tomorrow, when you return to Skyrim, all these questions will still be waiting, patient as the mountains, mysterious as the stars. And so, our tale comes to a close. Thank you for journeying with me tonight, Cozy Nights. If this story helped you rest, consider leaving a like. It helps other weary travelers find their way to our fireside. And remember, there are many more tales waiting for you here by the fire. Until next time, sleep peacefully and have a cozy night.